I hurt myself.
I was just a private in the Vietnam War, and I only played 2 test matches for Australia. But if you lump them together, I'm the only one in Australia to have done both. In fact, I'm told that I'm the only living person in the world to have played test cricket and seen active combat. This gives me the profile to do what I do. Create more awareness for post-traumatic stress. We drop the D because of the stigma associated with the word disorder. This allows me to mix and influence ministers, governors, air chief marshals, generals and our sporting royalty. I was born a POM and I arrived in Australia in 1959, but I was only naturalised in 2017. I had always thought that if the government could send me to war and Sir Donald Bradman could pick me to play in an Ashes test match, that those 2 things would make me an Aussie. But no. I'm here to talk to you about my lived experience with PTS, what I've done to conquer it, and how I've moved on. And that includes 40 years of not knowing the reasons why my life went south for so long before I was finally diagnosed. That's 40 years of crappy things happening when, deep down, I thought I was quite normal. You'd think that bad dreams, night sweats, teeth grinding, rashes that came and went, relationship difficulties, mood swings, violent outbursts, an aversion to crowded rooms and normal social chit-chat might ring a few bells, but no. In retrospect, I was lucky I'd always been a 2-pot screamer, so hitting the booze was never an option. And being an avid sports participant, drugs were never an option either. But becoming a workaholic, which was a symptom of my PTS, was possibly my saviour. It's the subconscious's way of shutting out the garbage that's in there. It probably stopped any thoughts of alcohol or me topping myself. It kept me busy, and it actually made me very good at my job in advertising production. And it's what drives me now. Ever since I was a small boy in England, my favourite football team has been Manchester United. I read recently that under Sir Alex Ferguson, they scored 166 goals in the last minutes to save or win matches. They never gave up. And I'd like to think that we have something in common there. We have a job to do and we can't walk away from it ever. Over 10 years ago, I had a GP, John Parker, who constantly volunteered to work overseas for Médecins Sans Frontières. What he experienced in Sudan, Afghanistan, Iraq and the Congo, especially with young kids, was horrific, and he contracted PTS as a result. But he kept going back, and he's written a book to help exorcise his demons. He asked me to read the draft and make comments, and although I have a major problem with my concentration span, I couldn't put it down. He is no different from me. When asked if he was too old for this rigorous work, he came up with my favourite lines in the book. We don't stop playing because we get old. We get old because we stop playing. I think that's another reason why I keep doing what I do. It keeps me young and alive. Memory loss is another side effect of PTS, but I've tried to cobble together some interesting facts from the past 50 years, which have led me to this point in my life where now I feel compelled to do what I do. And if I don't write it down or put it on the screen, I'll forget important parts and lapse into multiple uses of the F word as I struggle to remember. I'd want Clint Eastwood to play me in the Tony Dell movie. When my kids watched Gran Torino, they said, "Dad, that's you." And when I watched American Sniper with one of my daughters, she said, "Dad, that's you and Mum." Besides playing the lead in Gran Torino, Clint made American Sniper. Both movies accurately display symptoms of PTS without referring to it. Clint obviously gets it. I think that the teamwork involved in fighting a war and winning cricket matches is quite similar. You can't be successful at either without it. In the army, we were always taught that the platoon or section is only as strong as its weakest member. That has always resonated with me without thinking where it came from. While I loved playing cricket, I remember I always seemed to have these pangs of guilt at leaving my workmates to cover for me while I was off playing shield cricket. But I never really knew why at the time. But I guess I was the weakest member at my workplace. One day, after being 12th man in a test match in Sydney, and with a tour of New Zealand coming up, I told Sam Loxton, the national selector on duty, that I didn't want to play anymore. I didn't realise that it was a PTSD moment at the time. But my next job was to tell my state captain Greg Chappell at the end of the season. He wasn't as understanding. We had just been decimated by Jeff Thompson in the last match of the season against New South Wales. If we'd won that match, we win the Shield for the first time in our history. If you know your cricket history, we Queenslanders still had another 20 years of frustration. Greg's reaction was bullshit. He said, "I've just talked Tomo into coming to Queensland and I want you to open the bowling with him." Well, that was an offer I couldn't refuse, because Tomo was totally fearsome in those days before he damaged his shoulder in an on-field collision. They say that Shoaib, Brett Lee and Sean Tate were all measured at 160k plus, as was Jeff after the accident. I can tell you now that I faced him in the middle and saw him bowl often as a teammate. He easily bowled at 170k, and he actually hit the sight screen on the full with a short ball at the Wacker in Perth. Imagine that. Straight over the keeper's head and bang into the sight screen halfway up. Greg's theory was that if he's on my side in state and national cricket, I never have to face him again. And here I was, opening the bowling wing of the fastest bowler in the world, ever. So I played one more year of Shield cricket. The other point of this story is that camaraderie and peer support is an important way back in PTSD recovery. I'm sure I got that out of cricket. I played first grade cricket while still at school, back in the days when club cricket was really strong. And just when I thought I was going to play for Queensland, national service came along. 5 years later, with a trip to Vietnam in the middle, I finally made it. When I first played club cricket, the press called me the gentle giant. But not long after returning from Vietnam, I started to gain a reputation for being an aggressive on the field. It seems that no one was safe from my acerbic remarks, including umpires and my own fielders. But back in the dressing room, I was fine. I don't think it was something that I thought about consciously. It just happened. That was probably the first sign that things were not as they had been. But it just happened and I didn't notice that I was any different. The public reaction to the Vietnam War was quite hostile, and we were not exactly welcomed home with open arms. In fact, we were advised not to wear our uniforms in public, as we might get spat on by some exuberant university student. My own family, while happy to see me home again, said nothing. I might as well have just been down to the shop getting a bottle of milk. Maybe talking about it with friendly faces might have made a difference. 2 weeks later, I was back at my old job, not game to talk about where I'd been. I played 5 seasons with and against the Chappell brothers, and they had no idea I'd been in Vietnam until much later. They probably thought I'd just been born an aggressive prick. They are now 2 of my greatest supporters. In 1980, I got fired from my job. I'd been there since 1965. I was a director, and I was damn good at it. In fact, my area was the main revenue earner in the agency. I was not given any real reason at the time, but the boss cried as he did the deed. And I had even given up my cricket for them. But I found out the reason later. And here we had the old strength of the platoon thing again. It seems that I was rather hard on the people not pulling their weight, so I had to go. It works in the army, but not in business. Meanwhile, away from work, I was getting a reputation for being a social misfit. So, at 35, I decided that I couldn't work for a boss again. That's another PTSD thing. And I went into partnership with another fellow, a well-known rugby player. In 8 years, aided by my work ethic and my strong contribution to revenue, we went from a standing start to number 4 in town, winning state and national awards along the way. Then one day, with our third partner from Melbourne and the footy player's lawyer, they fired me. Again, no real reason given, despite me being a creative force and the principal revenue provider yet again. Was I just rubbing everyone up the wrong way again? 40% of the clients followed me, and in 6 months he went belly up. There's some real karma for you. Meanwhile, the cracks were appearing in my marriage, and by then we had 3 young kids, and they had to come first. So here I was, ready to start again with a ready-made client base. And for 2 years we flourished and grew the business. But in 1990, with the aid of the Prime Minister Paul Keating, the recession we had to have, and interest rates of 22%, plus an innate trust in a client who proved to be quite dodgy, I lost absolutely everything. My house, my Jag, my business premises, and eventually my family. I'd been warned about this bloke, but loyalty is in the PTS mix too. So up until then, the past 20 years of my life have been an absolute roller coaster of quite incredible ups and disastrous downs, with all of them connected to PTS. Remember, I had no inkling in those 20 years that I had a problem. It seems that the workaholic and OCD aspect had provided the highs, but all the other symptoms seemingly caused the lows. At that stage, I had 3 kids under the age of 9, and my marriage was disintegrating. With the whole country in a mess, I obviously lost the will to start again, and I didn't know why. Whatever happened to that aggressive go-getter? The 90s was quite a forgettable, nightmarish decade of moving from rental to rental, plus the completion of my marriage, disintegration, and the inability to be a proper father. As I said, I didn't have the energy or the will to start yet again in advertising. The details of that 10 years have escaped me almost completely. How I got through it is still a mystery to me. By early in the new century, my family were gone, and I was living in my mum's garage in Caloundra. But cricket, and more accurately, services cricket, came along and saved me. I was approached by 2 retired colonels involved in services cricket. They wanted me to be their guest at the International Defence Cricket Challenge in Canberra in November 2007. I was the only Vietnam veteran to play Test cricket, so they thought it was a good idea. They had about 500 international defence cricketers from various Army, Navy and Air Forces playing in the one carnival. Before coming home to Caloundra, they asked me if I still had my medals. The answer was no. So they insisted I should get replacements. They rang to check in December, in January, in February. I finally visited the Vietnam Veteran Drop-In Centre in Maroochydore in March 2008. We talked, mainly about cricket. They told me I had PTSD. I said bullshit, so they sent me to a site for a proper diagnosis. So now, 40 years after I came home, I finally knew the reasons why my life had been as it had for so many years. I got the pension and the gold card, had my first knee replaced in early 2009, and I did heaps of research into this illness. Then, I got an invitation to the 2009 IDCC. Would I do the speech at the awards dinner? I said yes. And I received a standing ovation for speaking out about PTS. And I got a hug from Angus Houston, who was still the CDF, plus many more handshakes the next day. This included the captain in charge of the Kiwi Army team, who said that half of her blokes wanted to talk to her when they got home. I had told them that 12 months in Vietnam had prepared me well to be in Ian Chappell's dressing room. I went home and had my second knee replaced in early 2010, and as I lay in hospital, I thought a lot about what to do now. I just couldn't do nothing and vegetate. This was the evolution of Stand Tall in 2010. I assembled a board and incorporated the PTS Foundation Limited, better known as Stand Tall for PTS. Before I could do that, I had to get rid of about $80,000 worth of debt against my name, a legacy of the past 18 years. Most of it was contained in a stack of unopened letters from the Australian Tax Office. These contained an accumulation of fines, and I hadn't been game to open them for years. That's another PTS thing. My accountant sent a letter to the Australian Tax Office. The ACA Hardship Fund gave me money, as did the Kerry Packer Foundation, and I was solvent again. At first it was quite slow going because I had no idea where to start. As I spoke to more and more people, I started to become aware of the size of the problem, and I was told you just can't concentrate on Vietnam veterans. What about all the other veterans and the serving military too? They are also affected. This illness doesn't just wait until they get out. And then there were the coppers, the fireys and the ambos, plus the endless list of victims of crime, accidents and natural disasters. The list grew every time I looked, and I panicked. How was a small volunteer group going to manage this? The answer was simple. We adjust about awareness and we concentrate on the military, the veterans and the first responders. They are the most at risk and they have the highest profile. Any success we have with them will filter down to everyone else. But we needed support to get going, and that proved to be hard, slow work. DVA didn't want us treading on their turf, and the Strategic Health Command were the same. Who is this intruder with his strange ideas? And the Queensland RSL, under the old guard, jealously guarded what they also perceived to be their turf. But I persisted, and I eventually started to kick some pretty good goals. Now, Defence, Veterans Affairs and the RSL all see the benefits of us working with them. We can do and say stuff which complements their services. It has helped that Sir Angus Houston is my patron, and we see eye to eye on all things. While it was very slow going to begin with, I was never going to give up, just like Manchester United. And, like John Parker, I knew that if I stopped playing I'd grow old, wither and die. I'm sure that an obsessive compulsive disorder is part of the deal. I just couldn't walk away. This was my therapy, and so I spent a lot of my own pension money just to keep it going in the early days. We started to gain traction when we were attached to Tony Abbott's Prime Minister's cricket match in early 2015. And the catalyst for where we are now was our first international conference in Brisbane, PTSD 15. That was the start of my amazing relationship with clinicians and researchers David Forbes, Andrew Koo and Miriam Dwyer. By then we had slowly morphed into an entity which, besides awareness, also saw the value of collaborating with other like minds. And we felt we could talk openly with government too. So Angus and I decided that we should combine all of our aims into this 2015 conference. It was hard work. It was successful. It was satisfying. It was good therapy. The Chief of Defence, Mark Binskin, then told me that I kept my promise to him and he'd back me from now on. So we immediately booked and planned for another conference for 2017. The 2015 forum was almost entirely clinical, but what of the awareness? In June 2016, with the help of Defence and first responders around the country, we took a convoy of vehicles and a massive semi-trailer provided by Limfox, which was painted up as our mobile billboard, on the road. We went from Brisbane to Sydney, to Canberra, to Melbourne over 11 days. We conducted interviews at all stops. We gave talks at the Goulburn Police Academy and the Australian Federal Police Headquarters. We had a civic reception in Canberra, and I laid a wreath at the War Memorial. We reckon that with mainstream and social media, we made close to 10 million impacts around Australia. We even wrote our own song, which was recorded by the Australian Army Brisbane Band. That video clip told the story of 11 days on the road. It was fun. If you stop playing, you get old. In September of 2017, we staged our second international conference, PTS 17. This was even more successful than 2015 on the awareness and clinical side, and also the collaborative side. Dan Tehan, the DVA minister at the time, played a significant role in the opening, the dinner, and multiple media interviews. And the keynote speakers from the USA, the UK, New Zealand, and Canada were amazing. Defence and the Queensland RSL supported us yet again. So we seem to be satisfying all of our aims, which we came up with all those years ago. But is it enough? In 2015, Sally came back into my life from many, many years ago. I've learned to love again, and I'm starting to learn to share once more. While we were in Canberra in 2017 to report on the conference, I took Sally to the War Museum. The Vietnam exhibit had a very confronting audio-visual display of diggers being inserted by Hueys. That's something I'd done quite a few times. I'd been there, done that, and it didn't outwardly worry me mentally. But suddenly my legs turned to jelly, and I had to hold on to something solid in case I fell over. I stayed for the whole show and moved on as my legs returned to normal. I then went back and stepped into the exhibit as calm as could be, to ask Sally to take my photo leaning on the Huey. That set off the alarms and security rushed from everywhere. There was some strong language, but we did get the picture. That event has triggered one of the questions in my mind about are we doing enough? My mind was okay, but my body reacted. I'm now told that sometimes the whole of body reacts to confronting memories, and sometimes only part of it. As a layperson who doesn't understand most of the clinical stuff that the experts talk about, I'm puzzled. Just like the guys who diagnosed me from a half-hour conversation at the drop-in centre in 2008, I reckon I can often spot PTS during a conversation. So, as a layperson, I have to ask these questions. Have we advanced clinically? What happens to all that research that is presented at our conferences? Are we actually doing, or are we just talking? Are we being too reactive instead of being proactive? Are we saving lives? Are we improving lives? Do the general public actually care? Do the majority of politicians really care? Does categorizing PTS as a mental illness add to the stigma and therefore add to the problem? Or is it just merely a state of mind caused by trauma which should not be lumped in with mental illness? Just when I thought I was getting somewhere. In 2015, we made a series of TV commercials at no cost to us and distributed them to the TV stations in Australia. They're still running, and I still get calls or emails from around Australia indicating that they are making a difference. We might not be at the coalface, but I'm confident that we're making things a bit easier for those who are. As our logo says, with awareness comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes action. So we keep going. This battle is not over by a long shot. There's lots more to do for everyone. There are many organisations in this PTS space, and we all have our niche. If we all work together, we will eventually prevail. So we keep on keeping on, just like Manchester United. And we keep playing just like John Parker. In October 2018, we staged another convoy in partnership with the Invictus Games this time. We drove for 19 days. We educated. We provided job advice for veterans. We talked to politicians. It was a roadshow for DVA, and we had a big Invictus flag, which we filled with signatures and good wishes. We presented that to competitors and officials the day before the opening. We recorded another song and video for this convoy, and we will make a movie of it too. At all of our awareness events, we encourage people to mix and talk. We tell them they are not alone. For a long time I've been myself and done it tough. And when Sally came back into my life, she has made all the difference. We've worked hard and had fun, which has made all the difference to our events, and we intend to keep it going. I'd like to leave you with my proudest creation to date, the Stand Tall song. This was written by me, but made very commercial by a couple of creative geniuses from my advertising past. It didn't cost us a cent. Listen to the words as you watch the vision. It tells a dramatic story, but emphasizes that all is not lost. Thank you.
There's a song that says it's a wonderful world, but the sights I have seen would make your hair curl. So I keep to myself, can't share or confide, don't wanna seem weak, 'cause I got my pride. People around me just don't understand, think life should be simple and go to a plan. But the order of things is often destroyed when the forces of evil or fate are employed. I've seen it all, heading my back to the wall. Seen more wrong than right, heard screams in the night. I still see my mates fall, and the battleground now. To move on, hell, but how? To rise, not to fall, to walk, not to crawl. Rise above destiny's call. Rise, stand tall. The grinding of teeth is all that I hear through the dark of the night. The depression, the fear, anger and rage, heartache and grief. Back on the bottle to get some relief. The sound of a chopper whirring above. When you're frozen in terror, it's hard to show love. The flashbacks that take me back, am I still there? Does anyone know? Does anyone care? I've seen it all, heading my back to the wall. Seen more wrong than right, heard screams in the night. Still see my mates fall, and the battleground now. To move on, hell, how? Rise not to fall, walk not to crawl. Rise above destiny's call. Rise, stand tall. Kids run for cover and hide. No way of knowing what goes on in my mind. Gotta get back some of the heat. I think I can do it, I can and I will. I've seen it all, had my back to the wall.